What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. We have Devin Haney, 28 wins and 0 losses, defending his WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO lightweight belts against George Kambosos, 20 wins and 1 loss. This is the rematch. They previously had the battle for undisputed in June of this year in Melbourne, Australia. This rematch is also taking place in Melbourne, Australia, different venue. This is going to be at the Rod Laver Arena versus Marvel Stadium last time. And the fight's going down October 16th. Now, this is October 16th in Australia, so us in the States will be watching the fight Saturday, October 15th. And I believe in the UK, you would be watching it Saturday night, whereas in the States, we'll be watching it Saturday in the afternoon, daytime. Now, I was thinking about going right back into this rematch video, doing a background on both fighters and going through their career. But, you know, I had done a preview going into their first fight where I really, went into the histories of the fighters. Devin Haney's background, George Kambosos Jr.'s background. But since I already laid it out there, and feel free to check out that preview if you just want a more comprehensive look at the ingredients and the histories of Haney and Kambosos. But in this one, since these guys just fought each other and nothing has changed in terms of their history, I want to more or less dive specifically into the ingredients of this rematch. And I also, by the way, recently did a early thoughts video on the rematch once the rematch was made official with a fight date. So you could feel free to take a look at that video where I'm exploring, the idea that maybe we are taking a little too much for granted in this rematch, assuming that it's going to be more of the same and that Devin Haney is going to win this fight by several rounds. And I was just talking about how the perceptions change, especially of George Kambosos, like the perception of him before the Teofimo Lopez fight versus how we viewed him after the Teofimo Lopez fight, and then how we viewed him before and after the first fight versus Devin Haney. It's like we've had these swings of perception when it comes to George Kambosos. And I'm of the belief that the truth is somewhere in the middle. No, he wasn't as good as he appeared to be in that fight against Teofimo Lopez. I feel like Teofimo Lopez's strategy kind of played into the hands of George Kambosos' skill set. He's a very fast and aggressive counterpuncher. And Teofimo Lopez uncharacteristically went head over heels in hunting and pursuing George Kambosos Jr. for the knockout. Lopez wasn't doing any of the things that make him such an electric fighter, where he's a little bit patient. He sets up his power punches with an educated jab and changing levels and feints and all of those things that allow you to set up the angles and the opportunity to land big power punches. He wasn't doing that against Kambosos. He was just coming in, throwing right-hand bombs, one after the other. Kind of made it easy for Kambosos to anticipate, to time, to drop Lopez in the first round. So Kambosos is a good fighter, but I, again, don't think that he was as good as he appeared that night versus Teofimo Lopez. Nor do I think he was as bad as he appeared in that first fight against Devin Haney. Now, that second one is a little trickier because it's like, the pressure in that case was really on Devin Haney. Like, I was of the belief that for Devin Haney to get the decision win on the judges' scorecards, he would have to beat George Kambosos by like multiple rounds, a few rounds in the eyes of the viewers, because I thought that, the crowd in Melbourne was going to be so raucous to where George Kambosos, with his fan-friendly style, anything Kambosos was going to do, throwing flashy power punches and counters, was going to elicit a huge reaction, which was going to somewhat play into the minds of the judges. So I was basically thinking, okay, if this looks to us like it's a close fight, maybe a 115, 113 fight, or even a 116, 112 fight where it looks like Devin Haney might have won 7 or 8 rounds, that this could have still been like a draw or a slight like split decision win for George Kambosos. And if you look at the official scorecards of the fight, which again, to us, it looked like, tell me if I'm wrong, it looked like Devin Haney won like 10 or 9 rounds, something like that. Some even had him winning 11 rounds. So anywhere from 9 rounds to 11 rounds seemed like it was within the realm of possibility. But if you look at the official scores of the fight, it was 116 to 112, 116 to 112, 118 to 110. That means 2 out of the 3 judges had Devin Haney winning 8 rounds and George Kambosos winning 4. So I wasn't far off in that assessment. This did not look like a close fight. And if it did look like a close fight, this would have been like a draw or a majority decision win, split decision win for George Kambosos. So there was a ton of pressure on Devin Haney to come into enemy territory and to basically just perform his butt off and to win convincingly to earn a decision win on the judges' cards. And Devin Haney, to his credit, did just that. So now we're going into the rematch. And you would think, okay, the pressure's off. You basically won to the public's eyes via wide margin. So you're going into this rematch. And is it going to be the same dynamic? Like, does Devin Haney, given that boxing is a little bit of an expectations game, does he have to dominate in this rematch to earn a decision win? Because I kind of feel like the Melbourne crowd is going to come in thinking, ooh, I don't know about this one based on how lopsided that first fight looked. I don't think that they're going to have the same faith in their guy to pull it off that they did in the first fight. So, that's one way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at it is if you look at the things that George Kambosos needs to do to improve his chances in this rematch, one, he's got to get off to a pretty fast start. And if he gets off to a fast start, then that means that he has reinvigorated the crowd. So all of a sudden you're back to square one in terms of that expectation kind of being reset, because George Kambosos out the gate might be looking like a fast fighter and it could look very competitive in the first round, to where Devin Haney has to do the same things that he was doing in the first fight to assert control, because Devin Haney was in control, I would say, by the 4th round of the first fight. Now, you could arguably have given George Kambosos like the 2nd round, because there were a couple punches that looked like he landed nice, clean power punches, which I think swayed the crowd and 2 of the 3 judges. And Boxing Scene, by the way, the website Boxing Scene, had this 118-110 like that 3rd judge did, which means that they gave George Kambosos 2 rounds. That is more or less how I saw it. 2, maybe 3 rounds for Kambosos. But if he starts fast in this rematch, and how would he start fast? One, you can't wait for Devin Haney to throw the jab every time and then you try to counter that. I was wondering, where is George Kambosos' jab? And yes, when he was throwing the jab, he wasn't really finding Haney. But here's the thing. Like, he was waiting for Haney to throw that jab, which Haney's jab was the story of that fight. He was just popping it. And then Kambosos would look for his opportunities to counter, either with an overhand right or with like a quick check left hook. So there were a couple times where he was landing the right hand, he being Kambosos, and was landing, with the left hook. He was doing so with decreased accuracy over the course of the fight, and he even became reluctant to let his hands go by the time this fight hit its middle rounds, because again, Devin Haney asserted himself by the 4th round by kind of taking over with the jab. And here's the frustrating part. When Kambosos was looking to get cooking with power punch counters, Devin Haney ducks, and he ducks into Kambosos. So Devin Haney is basically tying Kambosos up by the time Kambosos is ready to let more than 1 or 2 power punches go. So Kambosos cannot afford to be so episodic where he's only looking to throw 1 to 2 punches in countering Devin Haney. I feel like George Kambosos has to jab twice, not just 1 jab, but like 1, 2, because when he throws the 1 jab, he's usually missing. Devin Haney's like taking 1 step back. But if Kambosos throws 2 or 3 jabs to get into range, now Haney has a decision to make. He could either duck into Kambosos, which I think Kambosos also needs to do a better job at anticipating where Devin Haney is going to duck. Like if Haney's going to duck off to one side repeatedly, start throwing your power punch counter to that area. In the same way that Canelo Alvarez threw that low power punch counter when he knew that Billy Joe Saunders was going to duck off into one side. So that's one opportunity that can open up for Kambosos. But another thing that Haney was doing that was pretty much getting Kambosos to have to reset and throwing Kambosos' timing off is Haney has like this jab to the body that's like a stabbing jab, and he really mixes up where he's placing the jab, his speed on the jab, and the rhythm of the jab. Like Haney was kind of a master of rhythm in this fight, and it threw Kambosos off, especially those jabs to the body. Yes, he was reddening Kambosos' face with that jab, but when he would throw it to the body, you would see you would see his body language look like he was having to reset and he was not comfortable. So I feel like Kambosos has to go to Haney's body, but don't get caught up in the chess match necessarily. It is on Kambosos to make this boxing match look like more of a fight, where you are throwing 2 jabs to get into range and then throwing 1 or 2 or even 3 power punches once you are in range. And I feel like once Haney ties Kambosos up, Kambosos has to use that opportunity to start fighting a little dirty, like not low blows or anything, but use those clinches as an opportunity to start whacking to the side of Haney's head and start whacking to the body. You can't only exchange on Haney's terms. So I feel like now that Kambosos has had 12 rounds with Haney, and granted, Haney has also had 12 rounds with Kambosos, so it's possible that this is even more lopsided. But I feel like it's only up from here for Kambosos for these next 12 rounds against Haney. And I do think that this is actually going to become a more competitive fight than the first was. And granted, when I rewatched the first fight, it was a little more competitive than I remembered it. And I would still give Haney like 9 rounds, but each one of those 9 rounds did have moments where, Kambosos would miss with the right hand counter by like that much, or he would miss with the left hook, a fast left hook. Again, their hand speeds are very similar. Like Haney doesn't have a hand speed advantage over Kambosos. I think he's got like a legs advantage and a foot placement advantage over Kambosos, but Kambosos has fast hands, and there were a lot of punches that he threw that missed Haney like this much, and he missed Haney in a way where it was like, damn, you didn't know that Haney was going to dip off to that side or do that to make it miss narrowly? And granted, I don't want to take anything away from the sweet science and boxing IQ of Devin Haney. That's one of the ingredients that makes the recipe for success work for Devin Haney, is his ability to make opponents miss and his ability to anticipate and to kind of set the rhythm or get the opponents off rhythm. But I feel like Kambosos has to be more assertive, not only in the first couple of rounds, but again, when Haney seemed to be in cruise control from, let's say, rounds like 4 through 9 or 10, it is on Kambosos to kind of keep the volume high. You can't start reducing your punch output because that just plays into the hands of Devin Haney. Now, granted, there is the concern of, well, if you start letting your hands go and you keep on missing with your punches, not only are you gassing yourself, because you could ask any fighter, it's not the punch volume that tires you. It's not always even necessarily the pace, but it's when you are missing, and missing with power punches specifically. It sounds like that is one of the things that gasses fighters the most. So yes, that's of concern. But if you are worried about missing with your power punches, maybe go to the body with some of those power punches a lot more often, rather than just trying to headhunt somebody who's got such good upper body movement. So you can't let what started off as kind of like a faster paced fight and a high speed chess match to kind of devolve into the middle rounds and become more of a lukewarm temperature where, nobody is really just letting their hands go. It's more so Devin Haney controlling and dictating the terms of the exchange and kind of keeping Kambosos at range and at bay. Kambosos can't afford to let this happen into the middle rounds. And yes, if you are going to let your hands go into the middle rounds and insist that you stay more aggressive, yes, you are leaving yourself at risk and, risk of getting countered hard. And it's a lot of those, over pursuits that end up getting a fighter really hurt or dropped, knocked down, stopped, So if Kambosos wants to play it safe, yes, he could cruise to another wide, or in the case of the last judges, or judging, even not so wide decision loss. But I feel like in order to make this competitive on the scorecards, Kambosos just simply has to throw more punches. I don't think he's gonna knock Haney out with a tricky counter. So you've got to muddy the waters. Again, turn this into a fight where you can sway the audience and the judges into giving you more rounds just based on activity. Because even if your punches are narrowly missing, because, in the early rounds of Kambosos versus Haney 1, I saw punches that, Haney picked off or that were partially blocked. But you don't know the difference sometimes if you're judging the fight, especially if the crowd is giving that type of a reaction. So if Kambosos is throwing more punches, yes, he will be getting hit more and probably hit a little more cleanly, but at least you're not just standing on the outside getting cooked by a jab, right? And getting controlled by a jab and a jab to the body. So if you can muddy this up, throw more punches, again, easier said than done, but you stand to gain more favor from the judges. And again, if he won 2 more rounds on the judges' scorecards in the first fight, just think about that. If he won 2 more rounds, this would have been a majority draw, and he would have kept his 4 belts. But I do think he's going to stay busier. I don't think he's going to be satisfied with losing what should have been a lopsided decision. And I think that he might get dropped in this rematch. But I think that Haney is going to get hit a lot more in the rematch as well. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a fight. And again, I do think that there's going to be a knockdown involved. And I think it's probably going to be Haney catching Kambosos. But I think that it's going to be a more high-spirited effort from Kambosos. I think we're going to get more of the Kambosos that we had seen like in the late rounds against, Mickey Bey and Lee Selby. Granted, Bey and Selby, especially at the stages that they were in their career when they fought George Kambosos, they're not Devin Haney, granted. But I'm talking about the fighting spirit and the ability to keep your foot on the gas, even if you are probably losing the round. I think Kambosos just knows that he can't afford to let a pure boxing match break out here. And again, George Kambosos does have the physical tools, I believe, to make this more of a competitive fight. But I think that Devin Haney is going to, he's going to be as sharp, I believe. I don't think he's going to overlook Kambosos because there's that danger as well, right? When you've already beaten the guy and you're maybe starting to overlook him and look at, we've got Lomachenko waiting in the wings if Lomachenko, in fact, beats Jermaine Ortiz, and now Shakur Stevenson is moving up to 135. All of these are top-ranked guys. You've got, Teofimo Lopez at 140. So if Haney doesn't fight Lomachenko after defending his title successfully, if he does against Kambosos, he could go up to 140. And, Top Rank has a lot of the top 140 guys, Josh Taylor, and now Teofimo Lopez. So, and not to mention Jose Ramirez and, Zepeda, who's about to fight Regis Prograis. Top Rank has it going on at 135 and 140. So there is the possibility of Devin Haney overlooking Kambosos in this rematch. But I don't think, I give Haney way more respect than that. You could tell by the way that he conducts himself in his interviews and how he's prepared for all of these fights in the demeanor of him and his dad, Bill Haney. They just seem like they are ultra professional. And I think that Devin Haney has shown nothing less than absolute professionalism here. But he has been having difficulty making weight at 135 for some time. So the clock's ticking in terms of Haney's ability to comfortably make weight. So yes, that is also a variable, an X factor here. Is Haney going to be physically as prepared and not weight drained for this rematch? But I do think he's taking the rematch seriously because he knew how important it was to earn all of the belts, because remember, he was the avoided guy by all accounts. Like if you study the politics and, the trash talk, but then see who is unwilling to fight who. For instance, Ryan Garcia was Haney's mandatory, didn't want to fight for the title, for the WBC belt against Haney, right? So Haney, he needed these belts to be able to secure other big fights because he seemed to be the one who was pretty much down to fight anybody. And that still seems to be the case, but he needs those belts to be able to attract those big name opponents to want to fight him. So he can't afford to lose all of the belts that he worked so hard to gain. But at the same time, I also disagree with Haney's idea that he is bona fide top 10 pound for pound in the sport right now, because he did win all 4 of those belts. Yes, he is undisputed, but he won all of them in one fight. And it's not like he had beaten Lomachenko to get those belts. It wasn't even Teofimo Lopez that he beat to get those belts. It was George Kambosos, right? So yes, you are undisputed, but you beat one, we'll say A- at best, probably more likely a B+ level fighter, at least at the elite level, like a B+ fighter. You beat him to gain all those belts. And granted, yes, Jorge Linares, Jojo Diaz, Zayor Abdullayev, those are all quality wins. But I don't think that makes you a lock for the pound for pound top 10. But yeah, Devin Haney has a lot to lose in this fight. There's a lot of pressure on him. And so he needs to perform as sharply as he did in the first fight. But I do think that a little bit more of a fight is going to break out in this rematch. And I think that Devin Haney is going to hit Kambosos with more power punches than he did in the first fight, because Kambosos is going to press the issue. I think Haney is still going to win via decision. And I think that it's going to be a closer fight. I think it's going to look to us, the viewing public, like a closer fight. And I think it's going to be judged slightly closer. I think this is going to be more like a 117, 111 to our eyes. I think it's going to look more like a, like either a 9 rounds to 3 win or a 8 rounds to 4 type of win. Again, maybe with the knockdown in there as well. But I think when you factor in the judging, I think it's going to be more like a 116 to 112-ish type of fight across the board. And yes, 2 of the 3 judges did judge it 116 to 112 in the first fight. I think that was pretty bogus, I felt. But I think that we're going to see a closer fight, and I think that it's ultimately going to be judged a little bit more narrowly than the first fight was. But yeah, I'm taking Haney to win to our eyes, like maybe 8 rounds to 4. And then on the scorecards officially, something like 115, 113 or 115 to 112 if he scores a knockdown, thereabouts. But yeah, let me know what you think about the rematch between Devin Haney and George Kambosos Jr. Who do you expect to win the fight, and how? Do you think that George Kambosos is going to effectively make some adjustments to make this rematch look more competitive? And if Haney does handle business in this rematch, in enemy territory again against Kambosos, what do you think he does next? Do you think that they make that Haney versus Lomachenko fight, assuming Lomachenko beats Jermaine Ortiz, which we can't even assume that? Lomachenko's getting into his mid-30s now. He's been out of the ring for nearly a year. We just never know with these things. And Jermaine Ortiz is pretty good himself. And so, yeah, let me know what you think Haney would do next if he gets past George Kambosos Jr. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.